Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session this morning. This morning, we are going to spend just a little bit of time to welcome you to the American Association of Orthodontists Foundation Workshop for submission of grant awards for this next year. And it's a pleasure for me to welcome you. My name is Brett Schott. I'm the Vice President and Executive Director of the Foundation. It is a pleasure to, on behalf of our board, on behalf of Dr. Lily Horton, our president, to welcome you to this session. I am deeply appreciative of the leaders who will be helping guide us through this morning. Just a couple of reminders. Make sure you keep your microphone muted during this session so that we don't have any confusion as that goes along. For questions, please use the chat function. We will have opportunities to answer questions along the way, but if you can use the chat function for any questions you might have, that will be very helpful. Over the course of the next several months, as we prepare for launching the grant application on the 1st of July, and the working through the grant. If you have specific questions, you can always email George Reinerman, who is with the AAO Foundation team, and he will be more than happy to respond back to you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the chairman of the Park Committee, Dr. Saren Huja, who is the Dean of the College of Dental Medicine at the Medical University of South Carolina. I'm also going to introduce Dr. Sylvia Fraser-Bowers, Associate Dean at Indiana University, and Dr. Seth Alarati, who is the department head of orthodontics at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And they're going to lead us through this session today. So thank you so much for being with us, and we look forward to this session. Dr. Huja, it's all yours.
Thank you, Brett. And I really want to thank the AAOF staff who has made this event possible. This workshop, the purpose of this workshop is really to make individuals who are orthodontic faculty and those who are submitting grants more successful. We will share various criteria for the various types of grants, and what are the typical pitfalls, what is the best way to submit the application, and hopefully we'll be able to encourage you to put a application well in advance of the deadline so that you are best prepared and you have the best product available for the AAOF review. I think one of the things I'm seeing a much smaller screen of Hollywood Squares. I think another Park member who's coming on board is Dr. Sumit Yadav. I thought I saw him in the audience too, so welcome, Sumit. Mindy, would you advance the slide? And I want to, while Mindy's advancing the slide, I just want to welcome all the participants in this workshop. Some of you, I recognize your names and you're a little bit more experienced. Maybe you've been a part of Park or you've received awards before, and we are delighted for the progress that you're making. And others may be relatively new, and there may be some people who are applying for the first time. And before I go into talking about a little bit about the awards program, I will have to mention that I will be leaving in about 35-40 minutes, but you will be under the able guidance of Sylvia Fraser-Bowers and Dr. Seth Alarati, both of them. And the way we have broken up the slides is that after each section, there is a slide with questions. Now, obviously, you don't have to wait until that time. As Brett mentioned, please start putting questions in the chat. I might not be able to see your questions, but when we get to the slide that says questions, I think Brett would take the opportunity to read the questions, and we will try to answer your questions. Another thing that I want to mention is that I'm going to talk about the various awards very broadly and what they encompass. And then Dr. Sylvia Fraser-Bowers and Dr. Seth Alarati are going to go into the details of the application components of each of these awards. So let's go ahead and get started. And I've talked to you a little bit about the workshop goals. And on the next slide, we have the AAOF mission and achievements, I believe. These are the goals that we were talking about is to, and I just need to minimize my screen here, is to share information on the award categories and the requirements. You will get at the end of this workshop a lot of information about how the review process occurs, what are the criteria, and how the funding decisions made. So you'll get an inside view of how this all occurs. And really the goal is to improve the quality and the completeness of the applications. We'll share with you where people may forget certain things, and what is important in one grant may not be important in another grant necessarily, but we will share with you how to complete your grant and thereby increase the chances of your success. And when you are successful, there'll be a discovery and education in orthodontics, and this will allow us and the AOF to justify further fundraising efforts on behalf of the AOF. So we wish for all of you to be very successful, so the AOF can tout your successes and raise even more money in the future for supporting the awards program and of the AOF. So here is just a mission statement of the AOF. You can read it. I won't spend a lot of time in it, but what we're going to focus on is on the awards program. The AOF does things much more than the awards program. For example, the donated orthodontic services is one example. But I think it's quite astounding that the AOF has funded, if you go back to the previous slide, that the AOF has funded $16.1 million of career development and research support with 500 fellowships and research awards since 1994 approximately. And this is an astounding figure because we know that money for orthodontic research may be difficult to obtain from the NIH or the NIDCR or from various corporate givings, but the AOF is there to support the research mission and to make the future of the orthodontic specialty even stronger. What is even more astounding is that 76% of the AOF faculty who have received awards remain in full-time academics after 5 years. And I can tell you that a number of the people who've been supported by the AOF have also gone on to become program directors, chairs, and other leaders in academics. So this is a wonderful return on investment, besides providing an opportunity to do research to ensure the success and the pathway and the pipeline for retention in orthodontics. So last year, the foundation received 41 proposals, and about half of them were funded. So it is a competitive process. We want to fund the best grants possible. And you'll see as we go through how the evaluation or the assessment process for these grant proposals works. And one of the things that is really important to us is that there are no conflicts of interest, and the best research is proposed to the AOF board for funding. Next slide. So the calls for proposals, we have many times calls for proposals, and the business of orthodontic practice is one area, and then studying impending issues in orthodontic practice. And these are both very broad areas. So this doesn't mean that those are the only proposals that will be considered. We are looking for investigator-initiated research proposals, but if you are submitting something relating to the business of orthodontic practice or issues in orthodontic practice, please make a note of that in your application, because these are the calls for proposals for 2025. Next slide, Mindy. So, and this is maybe a little bit of alphabet soup for those people who are new to the process, but there are a number of award categories and number of award types. But essentially they are, and you'll become familiar with this terminology by the end of the presentation. But essentially, they're career development awards and they're research grants that you will see. So the OFDFA, which is the Faculty Development Award, you can receive up to 30,000 with a cap on a salary request for 20,000 if your university will allow for that. So this is meant for junior investigators, and this you'll see this information on the next few slides. But it's really to help you, a new faculty, to start developing and getting some money for research or for their salary, depending upon what their needs are. The other, and I'm jumping out here, the other career development award is known as the PFA, which is a more substantial amount. It is a maximum of 2 years, $100,000 over 2 years. There can be only one proposal per program in the United States. This is, and we will talk a little bit about this, about who this is meant for. The Biomedical Research Award, which is 1B, is research initiated by the investigator. It could be on one of the proposed areas that I mentioned in the previous slides. But the cap for that is $40,000 to do research for a year and a half. And then the Research Aid Award is meant for residents and for private practitioners, for part-time faculty, and the cap on that is $6,000. There is also something called a Center Award, and my colleagues will go through this in great detail, and these are for $25,000 a year for a maximum of 3 years, and you will hear a lot more about what you can apply for in these Center Awards. This year, the PARC deadline is October 11th, 2024. Is that, I think it may be a Friday, but if I'm wrong, you can correct me, Brett. But it's a little bit earlier than it has been in the past, and this is to allow for all the grants to be reviewed before the Thanksgiving and the holiday season in December, because the PARC committee typically meets in early January of the following year. Next slide. So you'll get a lot more information on each of these grants. Let's go to the next slide, which will talk about the various award categories. And I mentioned that you have award categories that are committed to an academic career. These are meant for US and Canadian institutions. And except for the RAA, which is a Research Aid Award, where we don't require any green card or citizenship holder category, the rest of them all require that the applicants be from US or Canadian institutions and either be US or Canadian citizens or be green card holders. Let me follow up a little bit on that. If you are a new faculty member, we understand you may not have a residency status in the United States. And in that case, what the awards committee, the PARC committee will, and the AOF will agree to is if you have a letter from an immigration attorney or from your institution, which verifies that you are in the process of applying for a green card or a residency status, there's typically documentation. Processes can take time, and the most time for the career development is when a faculty member is a junior faculty. And if you are a faculty who doesn't have these this type of status, you may be hampered. And then when we go through these award categories, there is a little chart that will make the distinction between full-time, part-time, and residents by award category. Next slide, please. So, and my computer connection may be a little bit slow, my internet connection may be a little bit slow, and the slides are coming in a little bit slowly, but you will go onto this portal to submit your grant. You will create a new account, or if you're a previous user, you will log in with your username and password, and then you'll go to the apply page. So essentially, many years ago, we required you to submit paper copies of these grant proposals, and they were due on a certain day at a certain time. but now the whole process, fortunately, is online and is a little bit more intuitive, and it makes you walk through steps so that the hope is that you would not forget anything that needs to be submitted. Once you have, you can always log out and log in. So let's say in somewhere in July, you start your process of filling out all the information. You have all the way up to the grand deadline of October 11th to complete your application. You can log in, log out, your information will be saved. And then once you're finished, you'll click the submit button. But once you hit the submit button, you cannot make any changes to your application. Next slide, please. So let's go a little bit more in detail for these various awards or grants. As I mentioned, the OFDFA is the Orthodontic Faculty Development Fellowship Award. It's a career development award. And my colleagues will talk about the various components of each of these awards, so I won't go into that. As I mentioned, the cap is $30,000 for typically 1 year, and it is meant for faculty who are 5 years or less in their first appointment. One of the questions that comes up is, as many of our applicants are foreign trained orthodontists who now have come to the US, what we are looking for is if you were a faculty, let's say, in your home country for 5 years, and now you're coming into the US and teaching in the US, that clock only starts when you're in the US. It doesn't start when you were first appointed in a non-US or Canadian program. The Postdoctoral Fellowship Award, and if you have questions, please continue typing in the chat box. I'm not able to see them, but when we get towards the end of the this first few slide deck of about 15 slides, we'll open it up for questions. The PFA is amazing mechanism. It provides support of about $100,000 with a possible third year of another $50,000. It is generally meant for an orthodontist who has a PhD or equivalent who is focused on research. And the typical people applying for this are people who wish to apply for a K award with the NIH, or maybe another R grant with the NIH, but they need focus time. There's a lot of commitment of time in the Postdoctoral Fellowship Award. So it's only meant for individuals who want to do postdoc research training, whether it be in the lab or in a clinical setting. And the hope is that these individuals, it's a very competitive process, and these individuals would have high potential for future extramural support. Again, there is only one proposal from each orthodontic program. We generally don't have limitations on the number of applicants from each program. But in this case, because there is a large amount of money commitment, we limit it to one per program. The next category is a Biomedical Research Award. It is meant for, I won't be redundant about the amounts and things like that. You can see it. It's meant typically for full-time faculty who have been there for 3 years or more. It can occur at any rank. At one time, it was limited only to junior faculty, but now it can be at any rank. And you can have any number of applications per orthodontic program. So you could have 2 faculty, 3 faculty. These awards are judged on the merit of the proposal, and they are not judged so that they're distributed amongst the various orthodontic programs. One of the changes that we recently made, and this is something that PARC strives to do since its inception, I would say, is that every year some new questions come up. And a few years ago, the question came up is, if faculty member is not associated with an institution, but is at a hospital, and let's say if they're in a cleft craniofacial orthodontist and they are full-time, they will also be eligible to apply for these biomedical research awards. And if you have specific situations and questions, please reach out to George and Brett. We can always take questions also that we may be able to answer at this presentation. Next slide. So we've gone over 2 career development awards, 1 research award, which is the BRA. And on the next slide, I believe, and it's coming up on my screen rather slowly, we'll talk about the Research Aid Award, which is a smaller amount. And it is typically meant for a resident who is intending to go into a full-time academic career or a part-time academic career soon after graduation. The most important thing in these types of awards is that there should be a letter of support which will state the academic interest in for the resident. The resident, because we know that the duration of the programs is different, the resident should have at least 1 year from the start of the award to complete the project. So like, let's say if you're applying as a second-year resident and it's, October, you're only going to know about the award, receiving the award in March. So you should have a full 1 year after that time to knowing that the length of programs is different to be able to complete this project. So typically when residents are doing this, they are submitting their master's thesis or research component of their orthodontic residency for funding, and they're providing a statement of interest and stating that they're interested in an academic career. The research aid awards are also meant for part-time orthodontic faculty. So if you're a part-time orthodontic faculty and you have a research proposal, then you can submit that to for that amount of up to $6,000. Obviously, it doesn't have to be that exact amount. Your budget could be a smaller amount, but you have to be able to justify the proposal. And the last award is the Center Award, and you're going to hear these names again and again, the various types of awards that may be a little bit confusing. This is typically up to $75,000. It doesn't have to be all 3 years. There is no seniority limit, meaning that you could be in various stages of your career development and rank at your institution. And the focus is to enhance collaborations within and between institutions. And we say this, you'll get into a little bit more details. There are 4 types of center awards. A center award is not a biomedical research award that requires more money. So if your award could not do, if your research was not such that it could be conducted within the 40,000 limit for a biomedical research award, doesn't mean that you submit a center award because your project would take $60,000. It really is to enhance collaboration within and between institutions. And we will take more questions when they come up. So I think I'm getting towards the end of my component of the presentation. And this is a flow chart that would help you in figuring out what kind of grant you're looking for and whether you qualify or what kind of grant you should be looking for. So if you're a full-time faculty, as you see on the left side out here, and you early on in your career, you're probably going to apply for a OFDFA and a PFA is what you would wish to do. Generally, the people who are applying for a PFA have an orthodontic certificate and a PhD or equivalent. The OFDFA faculty could have a PhD, but they typically have completed a residency program. They may have a master's or a master's MSD degree. They may not have a PhD, but that PhD doesn't eliminate you. It is what you're going to be doing and what you're going to be proposing that's going to distinguish these 2 awards. If you are a faculty who is greater than 3 years, I'm not sure if 3 years provides you all the experience, but you're a little bit years into in academics, and you have a research idea, and you are requesting a majority of the funds, not for salary, but for conducting a research project, then you probably will be applying for a biomedical research award. As I mentioned, the PFA and the OFDFA can be used for salary, and I'll have to be reminded if the PFA can be used for salary. I believe it can, but I'm forgetting right now. That's a question that I will pose in the chat box myself. And if you are going to be an orthodontic faculty or you're interested in academics, and you're a resident, you'll apply for an RAA. You cannot apply as a resident for a BRA or OFDFA or a PFA. or a center award. But the center awards typically for full-time faculty, you want to enhance collaborations between different institutions or do trials that are amongst other institutions or hold conferences and things like that. So going to the next slide. And I hope you're able to hear me, but this is where we'll stop to take questions.
Dr. Huja, we have one question in the chat so far. I don't know if you can see that.
I'm going to open it up.
Okay.
I'm just using my phone as my hotspot. So let me just see here. I think Bruce has a question. Is this the one here? If an applicant left their first appointed academic for many years and now is returned, does the OFDA eligibility clock continue to run? Or are the years of the appointment? I think, Bruce, you're posing a very tough question to me. I don't know if that's, I think that may be above my pay grade, but it's an interesting question. And instead of answering it, I would like to try to get you the answer. If you were in a foreign country for your first round of your academic environment, I know that that would not count. But if you're within the US and you're in academics for a few years and then you came back, what I would say to you is, please inquire with the AAOF staff. But what I would say in addition is if you can provide good justification of why you should be eligible for an OFDFA, and maybe in the OFDFA, you have to write various plans which you will become aware of in the subsequent presentations. I think there may be a possibility out there. Now, obviously, if they're just a few years apart versus there was a 15-year break, I think those may be considered a little bit differently. I'm wondering if any of my colleagues would wish to answer that question.
Dr. Huja, this is Seth. I could probably give my perspective on that. So if you recall, after my graduation, I started as a faculty at Harvard. I was there for 2 years. And then I did the craniofacial fellowship, which means I took time off from being a full-time faculty. And then I went back to being a full-time faculty. So when I had inquired about my eligibility to apply for an OFDFA, so the 2 years at Harvard and then the subsequent years at Iowa were counted. The 1 year break that I had for the fellowship was not counted. So technically I was eligible to apply for an OFDFA.
Okay. But what if you had done 3 years as a faculty and then went and did your craniofacial? Because then you would be beyond the 3-year period.
So for the OFDFA, it's up to 5 years from the initial appointment. So if I had done for 3 years, I would still be eligible to apply after.
Yeah, and what if it was 5 years? Then let's go.
Yeah, so yeah, if it is more than 5 years, then you're not eligible for the OFDFA, but you could still apply for the Biomedical Research Award.
Yeah.
I guess you could also apply for the PFA award, actually, if it is.
I think, yeah. Okay. Bruce, that answer your question? Or... Okay. The other question is, will this be recorded? Will this recording be published? If yes, where to find links? Second question for the VRA. Yes, it is. The VRA doesn't allow for multiple. No, it doesn't allow for multiple proposals.
Dr. Huja, your voice is breaking. Perhaps you could stop your video.
I think we might have lost him altogether.
He said he was using a hotspot, so that may be not that robust, maybe.
Yeah, so probably me or Sylvia could take one of those questions.
I have returned, but you're right. I was able to hear you, but I was not able to press the buttons quickly enough. But yeah, why don't you take the question? Because I don't want to interrupt.
So the next question was, is it possible to apply for 2 categories for junior faculty, PFA and OFTFA in the same cycle? Yes, you could, but only one would get funded. So the reviewers will review both the PFA and the OFTFA proposals, and only one would actually get funded.
And you cannot submit multiple BRAs. Maybe I missed on that part, Seth. That's where I disconnected.
Yeah.
Really good questions, guys. Very good. Very good questions. And great answers from Seth, too.
Is there a distinction, Saren, where if you submit a BRA as a PI and then you're sort of a personnel on another one, do we have a specific policy on that?
No, I think that as PI, as multiple awards, because we do allow multiple proposals from an institution.
Okay, you kind of broke up, but I think your
Any
answer
thoughts?
is, you broke
Go
up a
ahead.
little bit, but it sounds like your answer is there can be more than one BRA as long as you're not the PI on both.
Yes.
So I don't know if that helps the person that asked that question.
And then, you know,
You-
your commitment cannot be so much that you're not able to fulfill it. That's what Park is going to be taking a look at is this person on 5 grants and they're not going to be able to do the work? That's going to be an issue.
Yeah, yep.
We do
Dr.
have
Zong,
a
you
question, a hand raise. Yes, please go ahead, Dr. Zong.
Yes, my question is, so I'm a full-time research faculty in the dental school, and I also teach in the orthodontic department. So am I eligible to apply their BRA as the PI? I have the PhD in orthodontics.
Yeah, this has also come up in the past. Is your primary appointment in orthodontics or not?
Not. So my primary appointment is the research, you know, the dental education department. But I also teach in the orthodontic department. So that's why I'm asking whether I am eligible to be the PI.
Yeah, I think our guidelines say that you should be in the orthodontic department. It doesn't matter if you're not an orthodontist, but as long as, you know, we have research faculty who are not orthodontists, who are PhDs, but they are appointed in an orthodontic department and they become eligible to receive AOF funds. Now, if you're a researcher in a non-orthodontic department, my inclination, and none of these are final answers, we can get back to you on some of these questions, but is it my understanding, Sylvian said that would be different and they would make it ineligible, or have we changed that, modified that for the better?
No, I don't think we modified it, Dr. Huja. I think it says we have to have a primary appointment in the Department of Orthodontics, regardless of whether you are an orthodontist or not.
Yes, I agree with that.
Thank
My
you.
recollection, anyway.
But these are great questions that you're asking.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is because last year me and another full-time faculty in the orthodontic department, we submitted their proposal to the BRA, and he was the PI and I was the co-PI. And one of the review question challenge us why I have more research background, but I'm not a PI, but a co-PI. So it's very difficult to answer this question right now.
Yeah, so I think the answer is, you're right.
Mhm.
I think you can't just have some orthodontists. So when we evaluate all these grants, what we are looking at is, can the PI do the research?
Mhm.
Or is someone else doing the research for the PI? And, you know, I can understand that there is collaboration and teamwork, but if the PI has no track record, no publications of doing let's say a benchtop project, they are the PI of the project, and then the candidate is evaluated, the applicant is evaluated in the one of the categories of the review process. But if the applicant doesn't have the ability to do the project and they are heavily depending upon someone else, then that becomes a problem. So my understanding at this point is that if you were to apply for the proposal and you're a qualified PI, you would have to be in an orthodontic department.
Okay.
And maybe we should take a look at this in the future. As long as the research is relevant to orthodontics, maybe we should take a look at this in the future, Brett. Something to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Zong, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email with your question, we can research that further and collaborate on that.
Okay, I can send you email later. So
That'd be perfect.
What's your email address?
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
We have a lot of material to present from my amazing colleagues, Dr. Fraser Bowers and Dr. Seth Alareddy. If not, I will hand it over to my colleagues. Thank you so much, and I'll be leaving. But if there are any questions that you have, I'm sure my colleagues will be able to answer them. I'm also available at huja@musc.edu.
Thanks, Dr. Huja. I think I'll take over now. So over the next 15-20 minutes, I'll try to unpack the different components of the application and some tips and strategies on how to position your application really strongly. Okay, we could go to the next slide. So one of the components in the application package is the success of the previous AAOF awards you might have received. So this is a great opportunity to reflect on what you were able to accomplish with the award that was given. What typically the review committee looks at is the success or the career trajectory, and what are the chances of success with additional funding. And as always, like as Saran had discussed earlier, the outcomes are very important, and that's also a measure of how we can actually leverage those to secure more funding for the AAOF. And some of the outcomes that we look at are his publications stemming from projects supported by AAOF, presentations at national or international meetings, and of course, if the AAOF award eventually led to NIH award, that will be a very good outcome or metric to discuss too. So there is a component where you can submit the results of your previous AAOF award, and that is very, very important, and the reviewers view it very strongly. So next is the budget and budget justification. You get one page to summarize your budget, provide an itemized list of all the potential expenses that would be associated with the conduct of research, and you have to justify why you budget for a particular item. And please make sure that you follow the guidelines, especially with regards to salaries. As Dr. Huja had earlier mentioned, for the postdoctoral fellowship award and the orthodontic faculty development award, you could budget for a salary support or a salary supplement. And then for the biomedical research award and the research aid awards and center awards, you cannot really budget for salaries. And there are limits on travel expenditures. If you want to go and present your study findings at a meeting, you could budget for it. But for each award category, there is a limit on the monies that can be budgeted for travel. And if you're using other funds to complete the proposal, you would want to mention which parts of this study would be funded by other monies. It could be a startup fund, or it could be monies from another foundation, or like any other agency, and make sure that you discuss about that in the budget and budget justification document. As I told earlier, like for the fellowships, you could request a salary support or a salary supplement. So there are some schools which allow for a salary supplement. So which is like monies which comes to you from the AAOF directly. So if that is the case, make sure that you still have sufficient budget to conduct the study, or identify alternate sources for conducting the study. typically the reviewers look at how appropriate the budget is for the different activities. Obviously, it has to be complete and be reasonable about the cost estimates. And we also look at if it is not budgeted, are the essential equipment, supplies, resources available to perform studies and plans. And try to provide as much information as possible because you're really helping out the reviewers to accurately assess the justification for the budget. And the reviewers always want to fund studies, right? So if you make a compelling argument and you're reasonable, then in all likelihood, they would approve the budget. You could go to the next slide. The next component is the biosketches. This is required for all individuals or study team members who are named on the title page. This includes the PI, the co-investigators, as well as the consultants. And we follow typically the NIH format for the biosketches. The biosketch could be up to 4 pages long. You need to have a brief personal statement, about 3 or 4 sentences describing about your work, any positions and honors, contributions to science, which is usually the publications in peer-reviewed journals. And if you have any research support, please do mention that too, which is both ongoing research support as well as any research support you had in the past 3 years. For all the individuals who are named on the title pages, again, like you would want to describe the role, whether it is the principal investigator, co-investigator, or a consultant, and have a small narrative about the responsibilities, what exactly they would be doing or contributing to this project, and also mention about what percentage of their time they would be putting actually in the project. For the fellowship awards, specifically the orthodontic faculty development awards, it is very important to identify mentor or advisors for different components. And you would want to choose a mentor who's a content expertise in that particular area. And we also expect to see what the plans are for meeting with the applicant, whether it is going to be a monthly meeting or a bi-monthly meeting, and what particular kind of skill sets or background the mentor can actually bring out to the project. So this is very, very important. For the proposed plan, there are 4 major components. First is the abstract, which could be up to 1 page, and then the project plan. Now the page limits for the project plans are different for different categories, and we'll go over that in a bit. And then if you are resubmitting an application, then you get an additional page that you can use to address the comments which were raised in the previous submission. And you can have 1 page for the timetable for the proposal. And then for the reference sections, there are no page limits, and you can include all cited materials. Now for the resubmission, we always encourage resubmissions. When you resubmit, you have this 1 page that you can use to discuss about what changes that you have made to the pre-submitted applications. And please include the previous review that you obtained for your grant. So as I said earlier, it is about 1 page that you have. Any substantial additions, deletions, or edits you have to the previous application, you may want to summarize that and make sure that you respond to all of the weaknesses which are provided in the 6 sections of the critique of the original submission. With regards to letters of support, there are no page limits, and these are required for all the award categories. There are award-specific instructions on what kind of letters of support you need to submit. Please review those and avoid any extraneous or unrelated letters of support. Those are not really required. In the appendix section, there are again no page limits for this. If applicable, you can submit your IRB documents, whether it is human research or animal research. You could describe about the status of the application, and if it is approved, then you could upload a copy of the approved status. You can also submit up to 3 publications which are authored by the applicant or the principal investigator. This is not an absolute requirement, but you can upload up to 3 papers. And these papers have to be directly relevant to the actual application that you are submitting. Let's see. So do we have any questions up to this point of time for these components? I see Dr. Zong still has a hand up. I don't know if she has a new question, or is it like from the previous?
I believe that was from the previous question.
Okay. Okay, looks like we don't have any questions in that section. I can move forward. Now we'll get into the specifics of different award categories. For the Orthodontic Faculty Development Fellowship Award and the Postdoctoral Fellowship Award, there are strict page limits. For the OFDFA, it is up to 6 pages, and for the Postdoctoral Fellowship Award, it's up to 10 pages. So please stick to these page limits. And in the application package, we have given very granular details about the page limits. For example, what font size you could use, what kind of font you would use, and do not exceed the page limits. There have been instances in the previous years when an application was half a page more or 1 page more, and they were not even reviewed by the committee. They were triaged. For these two, can you go back to the previous slide? Yeah. So for these 2 awards, there are 4 areas that you would want to address. The one is the educational skills, clinical skills, teaching skills, and then your research project. Okay. Coming to the letters of support for OFDFA and PFA categories, again, there are no page limits. You need to submit at least 3 letters and choose relevant referees who can describe about your future potential as a full-time faculty, talk about your qualifications, what you managed to accomplish so far, etc. And for all the individuals named on the title page, please have a letter of support, and this includes from consultants also. And you have to have a letter of support from your institutional official. Typically, this is the Dean for Research or somebody from your Office of Sponsored Programs to give a letter assuring that you'll have all the required support or resources for your OFDFA or PFA awards. And you also have to get a letter from your department head or department chairperson as appropriate, verifying the eligibility for applying to these awards, and also to clearly state that you have the support and the time commitment to accomplish all the activities that are planned for this award. And finally, you would want to have the letter state that you have a confirmed appointment as a full-time faculty as of July 1st of the funding period. With regards to the project plan, as I said earlier, there are 4 major components. For the OFDFA, you can have 1 or more areas of emphasis. So you could emphasize more on research and clinical, or clinical and educational. It could be any 1 or more areas. Now, for the postdoctoral fellowship award, the research part must be the focus. You still have to have a plan for the other 3 activities, but research must be your focus for your postdoctoral fellowship award. And always provide sufficient detail for evaluation. Just keep in mind that the history of the previous accomplishments is not equivalent to the current plan. So you would want to give as much details as possible of your current project that you're proposing. And for each of the components, have key advisors or content experts that can provide a very strong letter of support and will actually be able to mentor you over the course of the funding period. So with regards to the number of proposals allowable per orthodontic program, for the postdoctoral fellowship award, only 1 proposal is allowed per program per year. If you qualify for the PFA and OFDFA awards, you can apply for both of them. in that same year, but only one will be funded. If you're a current resident who has a faculty position starting on July 1st of the funding year, then you could apply for the OFDFA or the PFA awards. You just need to have a letter from your department head or chair suggesting that that you have the faculty appointment starting from July 1st of the funding year. So this is a sort of a tricky kind of area. The salary support or the salary supplement for the OFDFA and the PFA awards. Again, this is allowed only for this particular category, the fellowship category, the OFDFA or the PFA category. So the AAOF is just fine giving the money to you as a salary supplement, but you may want to check with your institutions if a salary supplement is allowed or not. And the policies vary by each institute. For example, at UIC, we do not allow a salary supplement. We are okay with having a salary support, but not a salary supplement. Let's say hypothetically, your salary is like $100,000. I'm just making up this number. You can use like up to $20,000 from your OFDFA award to support that salary, but your salary is capped at 100,000 as per UIC. You cannot get that 20,000 to add on to the 100,000 that your institution offers as a base salary. But there are some institutes where you get your base salary, that's 100,000, and then this 20,000 could be an add-on or a salary supplement. So again, this is like very specific to each institution. So you may want to check with your institution if a salary supplement is allowed or not. And depending upon that, we'll have a letter of agreement either with you as a PI and also with the institutions. But you may want to just check with that when you do before you do the budgeting and submitting the proposal. For the biomedical research awards and the research aid awards, again, there are page limits. For the biomedical research award, it could be up to 10 pages. And for the research aid award, it's up to 5 pages. The major components are the background and significance, the clinical relevance of your proposed project, have specific aims which are very clearly delineated and have a testable hypothesis too. It's not necessary that you need to have a testable hypothesis, but it's great to have one. If you have already done some preliminary studies and preliminary data to share, then you should be, I think it'll be very beneficial if you actually put in the preliminary study results and have a very clearly articulated experimental design methods and statistical analysis. If you look in the application package, there is a small section about power analysis or sample size estimation. And we have made this mandatory, I think, for the past 1 or 2 cycles. So you have to specify clearly what your effect size is, what is the clinical effect size, and then how much power you're planning to use for the study. And you need to have a formal sample size calculation done. And that has to be uploaded in the application package separately, as well as it can go into the experimental design section. And we want to look at what the expected outcomes are. And we know that sometimes the experiments don't work as we had initially planned. And if such a situation arises, what are the alternate approaches you have thought about and how would you want to troubleshoot? So the review committee is going to look at this component very closely. Okay. Again, for the biomedical research award and the research aid awards, there are no limits on the letters of for the letters of support. But again, like have letters of support from your co-investigators, your consultants, from the institutional official, again, verifying that you have the sufficient resources for the plan. And for the from the department chair, if you are applying for the biomedical research award, you would want that letter to clearly state that you have been a full-time faculty for at least 3 years. And if you're a cleft craniofacial orthodontist, then make sure that you get the letter stating that you have some teaching activities as part of your job. And for the research aid awards, again, this is meant for residents or for part-time faculty. Highlight the strong interest in a future academic career. You could have like a narrative about on how this research aid award is going to sort of help you in your future academic career, which could be full-time or part-time. And then make sure that you also have sufficient time to complete the project while you are in the program. If you're in a 2-year program, probably it's best to submit the grant in your first year, because if you're going to submit the grant in your second year, clearly you should have graduated by the time the grant period starts. If you're in a 3-year program, then you could submit either in your first or second year and still have sufficient time to complete the project. For the Biomedical Research Award, there are specific calls for proposals, and as Dr. Pooja earlier mentioned, it's not we are not looking for proposals just in response to the specific call for proposals, but you could also have investigator-initiated research projects which are related to orthodontics. And our expectation is that your project will lead to publications and preliminary data, which would be helpful in you securing an external grant in the future. Again, we emphasize on this scientific merit, and there are no limits on the number of proposals an orthodontic program can submit. A principal investigator can apply for both the Biomedical Research Award and the Postdoctoral Fellowship Award too, but only one will be funded. And if you are a PI or co-PI, you can only apply for one category. I mean, like you can get funding only for one particular grant. You cannot get 2 different grants as PI or co-PI. So just be aware of that. For the Center Award, there are 4 categories of Center Awards. So the first category is if you're going to establish a center of investigation. And the second category is you already have an established center of investigation, but then you're proposing studies to be done in that particular center of investigation. And the third category is to create special collections or databases. And finally, you could also have collaborative or interinstitutional symposia or workshops. You have a 10-page limit for the center awards, and what type of content goes into the center award depends upon whether it's a type 1, 2, 3, or 4 kind of center award. And you have to clearly demonstrate that there is an actual cooperative or collaborative undertaking. As Dr. Pooja said, it cannot be like an expanded version of a biomedical research award. Okay, now my colleague Dr. Frazier Bowers is going to go over the review process and criteria for these different awards. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to take them. And then Dr. Frazier Bowers can start our section.
Hey, does anyone have any questions? All right, so keeping us on schedule, welcome everybody. I presume we might have the same cast of characters we had previously. In case you joined late, my name is Dr. Sylvia Frazier Bowers. I am a member of the PARC committee and have been so since about 2000 and I want to say 18-ish. There's been an overview already that necessarily means that as I go over the application review and funding process, and also then go over the roles as mentor, chair, et cetera, likely there will be some overlap of what I discuss. I'll try to be mindful of that. But in some cases, a little redundancy is good. It helps to make the points. Many of you can already imagine that in the big scheme of things, there is a role that everyone plays outside of yourself as the applicant or the institution supporting the applicant. Clearly, this is where the initiated action happens, where someone applies for funding. You attend this type of workshop to hopefully get questions answered, but there certainly is no other way that this is going to start without your interest in your application. If funded, the responsibility is to perform the proposed activities. That might sound like, well, isn't that obvious? If you look at the second and third items, you're agreeing to the terms of how you're performing that and in what parameters. And one of George's roles that I am grateful to work with him on is really kind of monitoring as people have grants. Have they made the right progress? Did they report everything that they did? And do they need an extension, for instance? And was everything conducted appropriately up until that point? So there is some both implicit and explicit requirements on applicants. But what you may or may not know, the individual that opened up the session for us, again, if you were not on the call, that was Mr. Brett Schott, who is the Senior Vice President. Staff includes Mindy Kopp and George Reinerman. And these individuals are very critical in not only setting the tone and being the liaison, the necessary liaison to our committee, the Planning and Awards Review Committee, but also to the board, AAOF Board of Directors, which is a totally separate entity. And so the staff in the office handles managing the receipt of your grant and any major requirements or answering some high level questions as to whether you fulfilled what needs to be fulfilled. The Planning and Rewards or Review Committee, however, as you've heard from my previous speakers, there are very specific components expected, and this panel is looking to see how the components align with what you propose, how feasible it is, how well done it is, and how much you were able to adhere to the instructions. The panel is made up of 9 members, and sometimes there may be a member or two requested to assist based on maybe either sheer volume of applications or based on expertise. These are scored, and I'll go over how that scoring is done. And after everything is reviewed and scored, and Dr. Huja has already explained that once it's due on October 11th, we have time to carefully review them and submit our scores, and our discussion happens in January. The PARC committee, the Planning and Review Committee, actually makes the recommendation. And we also will be the initiators of revising processes if needed, or new funding mechanism. And revisions, you know, for instance, someone asked, well, if I've been in academics and then I temporarily left and then I came back, that's something that the Planning and Awards Review Committee will discuss and see if we need to be more explicit about addressing that. All of these deliberations are forwarded to the AAOF Board of Directors that is responsible for fundraising, identifying priorities, oftentimes with recommendations from the Planning and Review Committee, the Planning and Awards Review Committee. And ultimately, the AAOF Board of Directors makes the final decisions on all of the awards. Next slide. And so how does this flow? Again, I've sort of alluded to that through that schematic, which is very nicely descriptive. Once the application is received electronically through a particular software platform, the senior VP and staff will check and make sure that everything has been met. There is the possibility, and I do know that this has happened before, if there is something turned in that was not on time or it was just incomplete, that may never actually reach the PARC committee. I don't know, and I can actually throw this question out to George. If someone turns in something early that is incomplete, do they have an opportunity to fix it? No, okay.
Dr. Sylvia, I think Saran had said that once you submit it, you will not be able to edit the application anymore. So I think
Okay,
it's over.
okay, thanks for that. Yeah, and basically the staff looks at the completion of the application, and if it is not, then indeed we will not get to see it. Next slide. So as the applications come in, they're assigned by Dr. Huja to the park members. We do look, COI is conflict of interest. You are asked when you submit your application to indicate if there's a conflict of interest. If there's someone that you are working with on the park committee as an advisor, co-investigator, or even if they work at the same institution as you, that would need to be a conflict of interest that is declared. But even if you don't declare it, we will do that on our end. If we know that we are working with people, either we published with them, we work at the same institution, we will disclose that. There are 2 reviewers that score every single application. And if in fact there needs to be sort of, if the scores are too disparate, so if they're too far apart, if someone gets on a scale of 9 to 1, a 7 and a 4, then there will be an additional reviewer. And I think what this process should reveal to you is that if you, as you submit grants and you're working hard on them, we are actually trying to increase the chance that it might be funded. We're hoping that maybe the 3rd reviewer would be able to help the chance that you can have another chance at getting a good score. And the each reviewer writes written commentary. So, and we actually did not do that all the time. I was a part of the committee really early on when we switched to start doing that, where you receive a very detailed explanation of how your grant has performed in each category. Next slide. Just again, for your own reassurance, if there is a conflict of interest, the individual will not be in the room during the discussion. They don't participate in the discussion or the scoring. So if you have a mentor, advisor, co-author, they will not be a part of your grant review. The assigned reviewers will present and give their scores, and this will be discussed. Everyone then will contribute to the final scores, which is tallied by a vote. And very specifically here, if someone is voting outside of the range, then they have to state why. And these scores are averaged. It is anonymous. It is not in any way linked to the applicant's name. And then at the end, the scores, again, I'm not going to get into great depth, but the scores are then determine what a reasonable cutoff funding would be. Okay. I was going to say I didn't see it on here, but in addition to giving a score, the members give a disposition as to whether they believe that this should be funded. So that's an additional, it's actually, again, in favor of the applicant, because even if the score wasn't at the super high end, if you had a significant disposition that it should be funded, that just helps to clarify that so that it's not just based on the score alone. Once the recommendations are made to the AAOF, and there is knowledge on our behalf as to what the funding available is. And it's not like, we're trying to fund as little as possible. Honestly, we're trying to fund as much as possible. So we're recommending, quite frankly, the maximum of what we can recommend. I don't want to hazard a guess, but based on my experience, there generally is not a problem with the recommendations we make being able to be funded based on the funds available. But the board of directors actually does make the final funding decisions, but they certainly strongly value and are guided by what our recommendations are. The applicant, again, will get that decision and they will get the critique, which, as I mentioned, I think has probably been happening for the past 6 years or so. But there was a time point where you didn't get the detailed category by category advice. Just, a pearl of wisdom. Read the critiques very carefully, because this guides you in a resubmission, which we are often very encouraging of individuals resubmitting, unless there was some literal fatal flaw, like something that just makes it just not a feasible study. That's different. I would say that's not common. It's more likely, especially when you look at the different categories, OFDFA, which is really meant to be developmental. That often is something that can be improved upon if you resubmit, if you don't quite make it the first time. Next slide. So the criteria. Overall impact. The scores are 9 is best, 1 is worst. The significance. So, when I was getting my PhD, I remember, of course, I was in with other residents who were not getting a PhD, they were getting a master's. And I would talk to them about my genetic studies at the time in a fungal model, literally mushrooms. And they asked me, well, so why are you doing this? And honestly, that was a valid question. And the so what or the why to any proposal you put in is often one of the most compelling parts of the proposal. Why is this significant? Are you convincing the reviewers that they should be clamoring for this information? We should be hoping that we get this information. That's where the PI and team has a very significant opportunity to convince us that this is really important. The investigators, the composition of the team, and I think it was Dr. Huja that alluded to this. You can't have a PI who's not doing any of the work and it's like everybody else on the team is doing the work. It needs to be very clear what the roles of the investigators are, and it needs to be balanced based on their time available and their level of experience. And it's okay if, someone picks up all the statistics and maybe the PI doesn't pick that up, but it has to be very clear, well, what is the PI doing? How innovative is it? This sometimes can be almost like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. It often, relies on what people are into. But, you can get hints from the request for applications, the areas that we're requesting things in. That tells us that, or tells you that this is something we're very interested in. And you can also get tips from attending the meetings. What are people talking about? What are people clamoring to know? And how can you do it in a way that's unique? Your approach has to adhere, in most cases, to the scientific method, if we're talking about your research. If we're talking about an OFDFA, which is your own development, again, that's still your approach to how you're going to develop yourself. We don't want people to merely indicate for their, say, educational plan of the OFDFA that they're going to teach classes. That is educational, but we want to see how you're thinking strategically about how you can leverage this funding to really do something that maybe you couldn't have otherwise done. So if you only say things that you already can do or are doing, it doesn't maybe bode as well and place you in the best light. The environment, including mentors and resources. This is a bit of a double-edged sword, and I personally always feel very empathetic. If someone is at a Research One institution, which many people are, but maybe some people aren't. If they're at a Research One institution that's very highly ranked in terms of scholarship, they have a much easier time with this. And it feels like maybe it's less fair if you're not at one of those and, you know, you don't have that advantage. Here is where enlisting the support of mentors don't have to be at your school. They can be elsewhere, and they may have an environment that has significant both intellectual and actual resources. And finally, I do remember, I believe Dr. already touched on this, previous funding. You know, we want to know your successes. We don't want people to have the award only to have it and not literally place into the public domain the advance of knowledge that you've gained from having this. So we hope to advance the specialty, that all of the knowledge you get is shared both in presentations and in manuscripts. And that helps to enrich the specialty. Strengths and weaknesses could be major, moderate, or minor. And when you look at the review criteria, if you've ever had an award, you will see how if someone puts on your summary that it's a strength, that they have an excellent team, and you know that's a major strength. A weakness, that their approach wasn't clear. Clarity can always be an issue. So these will be spelled out to you. And the other thing that is what I would like to call low-hanging fruit. The additional review criteria, just literally going through the process or having a letter saying you have started the process to get your approval, whether it's human or animal, to actually make sure you put a budget in and that you justified it and that you didn't add in things that were not eligible. So those are kind of low-hanging fruits to check off the boxes. And here is the score, the scoring scale. We actually are reminded of this every time we meet. And we're reminded of it because, and you can, again, this is another point of reassurance, we don't ever want to be in a position where we are doing something not thoughtfully and we're doing it, you know, literally from our gut. We don't do that. Every time we review, we actually look. So, I mean, honestly, if you got a score of a 6, it's literally saying it's very good. You know, I think everybody likes to get the best score and everyone wants a 9. But if you get a score of a score of a 6, it is literally very good. I do not want to step out of line in any way and suggest that there's certain scores that are always funded or certain scores that are always not funded. But I think it's reasonable to say if you get below a 4, that would never be funded. And if you get a 6 or above, that has a much higher chance. And 5 is literally, as it says on the scale, it's literally medium. It could go either way. So look at this and think about, have someone read your proposal. And if someone gives you the suggestion that, oh, I see these weaknesses, and they list them out for you, try to rectify those so that it doesn't move forward and detract from the quality of your overall application. And I think next is questions, and then I think I have another little part to do after this. Does anyone have questions now about the review process?
There's nothing in the chat so far, but anyone that's listening, feel free to speak now.
Okay, so again, we are very thoughtful about our review process. We put a lot of time and effort into it. So I do want to make sure that narrative is out there. Finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about your role and your mentor and chair's role in ensuring your success. And this speaks to, again, it's very tied to the review process. If you don't have a mentor at your institution that you feel is aligned with your project, it is okay to get a mentor outside of your institution, because we're going to be looking at the application in each criteria, which I went over. Is it novel? And this is as straightforward as going to PubMed and seeing, well, has someone done this exact study before? If so, what are you going to do differently? Is it hypothesis driven? I do want to say something about hypothesis driven. And again, I'm focusing now on the research component of the application. There are some studies that are hypothesis generating. So it doesn't mean that all of the studies that we value or ultimately score highly have to have a hypothesis. If it is a hypothesis generating study, it's important that you say that this exploratory pilot, or whatever word you want to use, study is to generate a hypothesis that will advance our knowledge in fill in the blank. Those studies that are probably a little more traditional scientific method will often have a hypothesis though. So make sure you've ruled out whether you have a hypothesis generating or a proposal that is supposed to be hypothesis driven. Low-hanging fruit, did you submit on time by following instructions and submitted everything? Again, my earlier blunder is, well, what if you submitted it and you just realized I left something out? Apparently that is not going to work. So very important that you go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Next slide. Another thing that we've seen some of is individuals who may not be eligible for the category that they applied in. And there's some discernment on our part is whether there's a category in which they're most competitive. Again, I don't want to speak out of turn, and my colleagues and or George or Brett can comment. But sometimes if there's a nuance to determining where someone fits, that may not be just immediately thrown out. That may be one of the things where we discuss, and in other words, don't just throw it out, but definitely review it and then discuss whether this fits in any category, and if so, which, if in fact there was concern. Did you, actually, this is a very, very good point. If you have received funding, not only from the AAOF, but we look at everything you've done. If you've received funding from the AAOF in particular, but from anything, and you haven't clearly demonstrated that you've produced a manuscript, a poster, a presentation, or some product, that actually would create a deficit. And if you have had funding from the AAOF and you didn't turn in your reports, that would be a red flag. I am not saying that anyone who didn't turn in their report will not get funding, but it does create a red flag. And I think, you know, the low-hanging fruit aspect of this is make sure you've turned everything in. We have been in what feels like a very long transition from turning things in via a totally different system to the new system, which is Foundant. But it's been ongoing for, I think, George, has it been 3 years? I know you're new, but I feel like it's been 3 cycles that we had it. And
Yes.
yes, thank you. I think we're all kind of, you know, caught up now, and everything is through Foundant, and it is a system that increases the capacity to communicate with the staff and George in particular. And if you're not sure if you turned in something, this system allows you to figure that out pretty quickly. Okay, next. Going back to talk about the mentorship and consultants, the strong and relevant mentor, of course, could be at your own institution, but it may not be. Or you may have a mentor at your institution that is not is a mentor in one way. They may be a mentor for your career, but not for your research. Or they may be a mentor for your research, but not for your career development. Again, if you're doing an OFDFA, there's a little more wiggle room in how you compose a team. You can have a consultant from another institution that fills in the gap that may not be met by your mentor. For the Biomedical Research Award, that is like a junior NIH grant. So we're expecting the PFA and the Postdoctoral Fellowship Award. For those, we are expecting a very robust team to carry out the research products. So there, I think it's a lot more critical that you have the right team composed, that you get input from the various team members to make sure that not only that they have the expertise, but that they have the time. As a little bit of a pearl, there are times when, you know, we look at the amount of effort that mentors are providing to your project. And if that mentor is the mentor of several other people, or their CV shows that they have, you know, 80% grant funding, and we really are looking to make sure that people are able to, the personnel are able to deliver the aspects of the project that they say they will. And finally, I mean, again, this is just a little pearl of wisdom. Every now and then, the mentor may have contributed to the application. Again, just as an example, I've seen this, and they forgot to, in their little personal statement, they forgot to change the title of who they were doing it for. So it is the PI's role to make sure that they've read over everything, and then also ask the mentor and consultants to read over everything to make sure that, because there's so many of us who do multiple projects, that they have the right verbiage for the application that is being submitted. And the mentor and consultant, these are the team members that can advise you if your research question is, as we mentioned before, significant, if it is innovative, and if it is approached appropriately with either a hypothesis generating or a hypothesis driven strategy. Next slide. So we are literally less than 6 months prior to submission, but the advice is to start very early. The award materials are going to be posted very soon. And, you know, if again, these are all things I think everyone on this particular call probably already knows. Just make sure you've done all of your due diligence in searching the public domain, which for many of us is PubMed, and make sure that you're not asking something that's already been asked. That is something we think about, and that you have the most relevant experimental design. Sometimes what comes up in our discussion is people will have a design that is not inherently bad, but it is not contemporary. It may be, you know, they're using a 2D image to answer a question that would be better answered with a 3D image. So just be very careful about that. And finally, for career development, this is something that, you know, it's an interesting dilemma. We went to school to become orthodontists or dentists. We did not go to school to become educators or teachers. So the onus still falls on us to understand if we're going to have, for instance, an OFDFA, what constitutes an adequate educational plan? What is representative of good teaching methods, if that's what you're part of what you're putting in your proposal? And there, obviously there's some low-hanging fruit for courses you can take, but for those applications that stand out, you can tell they really went out of their way to insert novel pedagogy or teaching opportunities. Next slide. A lot of this, I think I've already said in terms of mentorship. Sometimes the mentorship actually can make the whole application. If the application is in a medium range and it has excellent mentorship, it can tip the scale, and it can go the other way. If it's in a medium range with not very good or just, you know, maybe hardly any obvious mentorship, it can tip the scale in the other direction. And there's always the concern, and I've made this point already, that, you know, the PI needs to do their work. They're the one that goes in and makes sure everything is organized, the detail is there, and all of the help that you get with that is the bonus, but you need to be prepared to be the captain of this effort. Next slide. So for 2025, we really have all of the awards that we have. Dr. Huja and Dr. already went over these in different ways. The junior faculty, which is OFDFA and PFA, and you saw the schematic that Dr. already shared, or Dr. Huja, I don't remember who shared it, but for some individuals, the years that you can get a BRA and an OFDFA overlap. It's your decision whether or not you want to enter that BRA arena, or whether you want to maximize your opportunity for the OFDFA, which, correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, I believe you can get up to 3 times the OFDFA. Okay.
Yeah, 3 times. Yeah, you could get an
Yes.
award for three times actually. Yeah.
Yes, and I also believe that I remember discussing this, but again, I want to check. Once you have crossed over into, I think, is it the PFA that you can't go back to the OFDFA? Can somebody clarify that?
Yeah, that's right. If you get a PFA, then you can't go back to the OFDFA.
That's what I thought. So
Obviously,
these are things, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that probably strategically, it's great to have 3 OFDFAs and then go for the PFA and then go for the biomedical research award eventually.
Yes, and a lot of people don't do that, and no fault of, I mean, if everything works out in the end, that's fine, but there are a fair number of people that will skip ahead, and you know, you're just not allowing yourself to maximize the OFDFA, that it's not that the OFDFA is easier, but it considers multiple aspects of scholarship, which includes your own development, education, teaching, and research. Whereas if you're looking at a PFA or a BRA, you really have to be very, you have to have a very robust and evidence-based, well-honed research proposal. The Center Award and the Research Aid Award are two other awards that are possible. Sorry, go ahead. The EIA is not being offered in 2025, so that's a kind of a bigger award, but that's not being offered. What was the last year that we have provided an EIA? Nobody knows. Okay, I know of at least two. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go
it
ahead.
might be before me.
Okay, so that's not being offered again, but I don't know how many people are even aware, because I think it has not been Win One funded recently. Next slide. So what we hope is that we can continue through forums like this, through interactions at the AAO, Society of Educators meeting, continue to help enrich those of our community who are interested in being academics with grant funding. And as was already stated in this proposal there, or this workshop, many individuals who've gotten an AAOF award go on to get bigger awards, and they go on to be leaders in orthodontic education. So we're always trying to get the quality of applications to be the best that you can do. And we want to inspire you to continue to make big discoveries in orthodontics. We want to keep our faculty development successes up. And we also want to figure out how we can identify newer and better ways to learn what the best call for proposals are. What do people really want to learn about? What knowledge are we clamoring for? And of course, we're always thoughtful about how we provide review and feedback, and the AAOF strategic plan is all a part of that, and we keep all of these things in mind. Is this my part too? Yes? I guess so. Mindy smiled.
This is the last slide before the end. Oh,
Okay, I think you went back.
I did. Yeah, I switched screens.
Okay. Okay. So as always, we try to think of how we can be more novel. What has really helped catapult orthodontics as the third specialty in medicine and the first in dentistry to always being relevant is having people with new ideas. And, you know, while projects, for instance, in maybe development has been a little slower, we are still interested in things that are emerging or frankly already here, machine learning. And this is not to say that you should just do a proposal on machine learning, but this is something that people are interested in. Machine learning is on the rise. We know that we can potentially aid diagnosis with conditions that include periodontal changes, soft tissue, compliance, growth status, and artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is frankly a very timely and relevant topic in the entire society, not just in healthcare. So anything that will allow us to understand how to interact with artificial intelligence is greatly appreciated. We don't want to shy away from it because we want to make sure that whatever is out there in the ethosphere of our profession is something that we have vetted together with evidence. So we certainly are not, some people have very strong feelings about AI, but the reality is AI is here. We need to make sure that we're using it in the most responsible and most productive way. And that is, I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fraser-Bowers, Dr. Alaretti. I don't know if there are any other questions. You can always please get a hold of us when you can. Myself, George, we're always ready to answer questions. Mindy, if you have a question, please email George. He's always willing to help assist you in preparing an application. And thanks to the AAO Foundation. These grants are all funded through the generosity of donors and have been for the last 30 years. And so that $16.1 million that we've been able to award over the last 30 years has come from the generosity of members of AAO and the foundation. And we really appreciate that. And thanks to the committee who gives so generously of their time to make these awards, and they put in an enormous amount of time. So many thanks to them. If there are no questions further, I think that ends our session for the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, and wish you all the very best with your applications.
Yes, best wishes and looking forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all.
Bye.